The following is a special presentation of ESPN Classic.
The 1990s bore the Fall Classic's wildest of championship showdowns. It began with an upset of the defending champion Oakland Athletics and ended with the coronation of yet another New York Yankees dynasty. It would be a decade dominated by the Bronx Bombers.
Yankees win!
We relive the dramatic moments of baseball's recent past.
Touch 'em all, Joe! You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life!
From 1990 to 1999, baseball experienced some of its greatest highs.
Deep left center, way back! Way back! The Twins go to the seventh game! Touch 'em all, Kirby Puckett! Touch 'em all, Kirby Puckett!
And its most disappointing lows.
All I can say to all of you in the end is I'm really sorry. I wish this day obviously had never happened.
A 5-year-old expansion team, the Florida Marlins, discovered the missing ingredients of a World Series magic potion and then poured them down the drain. The Tomahawk Choppin' Atlanta Braves would taste victory champagne just once, despite being part of 5 Fall Classics. And future Hall of Famers led the Toronto Blue Jays to back-to-back crowns. As we embark on the first World Series of the millennium, how will these players and teams be remembered? Where do they stand in the historical context of the game? This is Judgment Day. This is the ESPN Classic World Series Roadshow. Welcome to the ESPN Classic World Series Roadshow, presented by TiVo at Yankee Stadium. Here's Rich Eisen.
It is the first World Series of the new millennium, and what a doozy. It's a Subway Series, the first since 1956. So it's a new millennium, but we're still remembering the past a little bit at this World Series. Pretty much the general theme of this show. We'll be reliving the 1990s World Series history, and we'll also be talking about the Subway Series with several guests. Keith Hernandez leading off quite a bunch. Chuck McGraw, Greg Nettles, Tim Raines, Brett Saberhagen, Rusty Staub. We are out in left field of Yankee Stadium. We're just about 3 hours from now. Folks would be screaming at us, "Down in front, I'm paying $5 grand for these seats. I can't see nothing." Or something to that effect. Hi, I'm your host, Rich Eisen, and I'm here with Tim Kirkchin here for the ESPN Classic Road Show at the Subway Series, the World Series. We'll be talking about that, and we'll also be talking about the 1990s postseason, which, Tim, was one heck of a decade in terms of postseason play. Would you say it's one of the best?
Well, I'm only 43 years old, but I think it was the best decade for postseason baseball. You look at the 91 World Series, the 93 World Series, the 97 World Series, the whole story with the Braves, the dominance of the Yankees, the Joe Carter homer, unbelievably compelling baseball in the 90s.
Well, I mean, we're going to be talking about everything from the Cincinnati Reds sweep of the Oakland A's in 1990 to the New York Yankees double sweeps to end the 90s decade. And we're just going to basically bat things around back and forth in terms of where people might stand in terms of legacy. And that would make you, Tim, the judge and jury. Are you prepared to place such a burden on your shoulders?
I think I'm up for that, Rich, me and you together.
All right, I'll share part of that burden with you. Now, we are in Yankee Stadium for the World Series 2000, and then just 3 hours from now, we will get the first pitch of that ball game. So why don't we talk about this a little bit? Al Leiter against Andy Pettitte. Pettitte, who pitched the very first interleague game between the Mets and the Yankees. He lost to Dave Malicki in that game back in June of 1997 against Al Leiter, who started the last World Series game not won by the New York Yankees.
Well, to me, it's a classic, perfect Game 1 matchup. Al Leiter, a Jersey guy who used to pitch for the Yankees and now pitching for the Mets, pitching in Game 1 against Andy Pettitte, who arguably has pitched more big games for the Yankees over the last 5 years than anybody else. Al Leiter is the perfect guy to be pitching in this game, mainly because he has such a connection. And again, he has the type of stuff that will be perfect for this game on these Yankee hitters. We'll see those cutters on the inside part of the plate. And he's, you know, being a Jersey guy, he knows what this is all about. And Andy Andy Pettitte is a similar guy in stuff as far as cutters in on the hands of these guys, but he doesn't have the same personality as Al Leiter, the frenetic Leiter against the emotionless Andy Pettitte. But I'll tell you this, there'll be a lot of emotion in this ballpark tonight.
Well, Al Leiter started 5 games against the Yankees as a New York Met. It'll be his 6th game tonight. So, you know, in the last couple of years, and we'll be talking about these World Series later on in this road show with the Braves twice and the Padres in '98, those teams came in perhaps a little spooked by the mystique of Yankee Stadium, if not the overwhelming aspect of the New York media. This New York Mets team will not have that.
No, the Mets will not be spooked by anything, believe me. They've played more compelling games the last 2 postseasons than any team in baseball. They've been through more remarkable games. Nothing fears them at this point. Not the Yankees, not Yankee Stadium, because they played in New York for all these years. So they may not be as good as the Yankees, but they're certainly not going to be intimidated by the Yankees.
Well, how important is winning Game 1 in the 77 World Series played in the best-of-7 format? 43 teams have won Game 1 and gone on to win the series. That's a winning percentage of 55.8%. So 56% of the Game 1 winners go on to win the World Series. We'll see how that plays into tonight. Well, one of the guys who played in the last World Series for the New York Mets in 1986 is going to be our first guest. He bats leadoff for us. Didn't bat leadoff for the New York Mets. What he did was perhaps play first base better than anybody in the history of the game. Keith Hernandez, 11 straight Gold Gloves, .994 career fielding percentage, and he also played in 14 World Series games. 30 career postseason contests for Keith Hernandez, batted .296 for his career. He played 2,088 career games, 1,071 RBIs. So basically, Keith, you had an RBI for every other game in your career. That's not too shabby. And I see you're wearing your hardware in your hands right about now.
I've got both my rings on, which the 82 Cardinals on my left hand here, and my New York Met 86.
Do you wear those all the time?
I don't wear them hardly ever. In this situation here with the World Series time, I put them on because people want to see them, and I'm doing a lot of work around here as far as at Shea Stadium with the Mets.
And do you scratch your face a lot? Do you do like...
No, I walk around like this.
Well, that's very nice. Wow, Subway Series, Keith. Did you think you'd ever see it between the Yankees and the Mets?
Well, I figured sooner or later it was going to happen, but you know, to have it happen in the year 2000, the turn of the century, is just unbelievable. And I do think the 2 best teams in baseball are playing right now. And what I like about this series is that it's a series now. It's going to be dominated by the pitching. These are 2 good pitching staffs. I don't want to see a slugfest series. I want to see a well-pitched, well-played game, 7 games, hopefully.
Keith, you only played a handful of games in this ballpark in your career. When you played that first regular season game, was that a pretty special play where Ruth and Gehrig used to play?
Well, when I came here, there was no postseason play. I mean, not postseason, interleague play when I played. When I was with Cleveland my last year, I came in here, and certainly it was the first game I played. But we played 3 Mayor Cup games here, where the Mets play the Yankees before the season starts. And the first time I came here, I was a Yankee fan, a Mickey Mantle fan growing up. So when I came here, yes, I had to come here early and walk around, go back and see the monuments. And it was just a great, great, great thrill. There's just so much here, so much, you know, it's baseball lore.
Yeah, when you first came in here today, that was the first trip you made.
Yep.
You went to go see what was going on, and the number 7 in your 17 of your Mets jersey,
yes.
that's for Mickey Mantle, huh?
Yes, we're born on the same day, or I should say I am born on his birthday, along with Juan Marichal, believe it or not. So Mickey was my idol, and when I came up with the Cardinals, as a rookie, I was given 18, and as a rookie, I had to take the number. The next year, I got 37 because Dizzy Dean's number was retired at 17. Reggie Smith had 7. Other veterans had other numbers, so I took 37. Came over to the Mets. 37 was retired Casey Stengel, and I took 17. I could have took 7, but that's the Mick.
That's the Mick. So there are so many great storylines to this Subway Series, but one of which are the former Mets currently on the New York Yankees, David Cohn and Dwight Gooden, and Mel Stoudemire, the pitching coach, who was the pitching coach for the world champion '86 New York Mets as well. Can you talk to a little bit to us about what Dwight Gooden was like back then? Was he the best you've ever seen back then?
He was the most exciting pitcher to come down the road as a rookie in those first 4 or 5 years he had in New York. He was like Bob Gibson and Sandy Koufax. As a rookie, was he 19 years old when he was doing all this stuff?
Right. And
I think he broke early wins rookie record for strikeouts. I could be wrong there. I think I'm right. But it was just electrifying. If he went out and struck out 11, it was a bad night. I mean, it was just that electrifying, where he had the K Club up in the upper deck. and the K cards, and they'd just be lined up across the wall. There'd be 15 of them. That was the norm, was 13, 14 strikeouts. And I've never in my career experienced anything like that in my life.
And how happy are you for David Cone, a guy you played with for all those years, that he's still going, and there's a chance he might even start a game in this series?
David's a great guy, and it's just a shame. I feel that David and Dwight and Darryl should always have been Mets, and it's just a shame it didn't work out that way. They should have been the cornerstone of the Met franchise after Gary Carter and I left. But they're great friends, and I couldn't be happier for them to be in the World Series again.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the ring on your left hand right there, the St. Louis Cardinals. Yes. 1982, your one postseason home run.
Yes, off Don Sutton, too.
Don Sutton. Talk a little bit about that one.
Well, that's a pitcher that got me out, and we were down 3-2 and got back home on Game 6 to St. Louis, and we had to win that game, and that's the vaunted Don Sutton. I think one of the greatest pitchers that I ever faced, and someone that got me out consistently. And I had a very long at bat there, and he finally hung me a curveball and got it over the middle of the plate. And I made it score, I think it made it 7-0 and kind of opened the game up in the 6th inning, and we went on, of course, to win Game 7 and my first World Championship.
Keith, that year you hit 7 homers in '82. You knocked in 94 runs. Can you imagine a first base? And you were the best first baseman in the league. Can you imagine a first baseman today hitting 7 home runs in a whole season?
Well, we talked earlier. The game's changed. Ever since the strike of the World Series. I think that it's more power now. It's less finesse. It's more long ball. They brought the fences in. I do feel the ball's juice, and not to take anything away from the players today, that they're bigger and stronger, but the fences could remain the same. And it's just, you know, the game is still the game, and I'm just thrilled that these two teams are in it right now. And I also had a lot of jackrabbits in front of me. I had Lou Brock in front of me and Gary Templeton. They were real jackrabbits. We had a big St. Louis AstroTurf, so not to take any detract from my 94 RBIs. I'm very proud of that. Thank you.
Well, Keith, thanks so much for joining us. You're going to be working part of this World Series, correct?
Yes, I'm working for MSG, Madison Square Garden Network, post with Marv Albert, post-game, and I'm doing the Fox.
Don't say that word. The dreaded F channel. That's okay. So you're doing pregame for the local
F channel. I can't say the F word?
Well, it depends. We'll have to consult the FCC with that. Thanks so much for joining us, Keith. We really appreciate that.
Okay.
The ESPN Classic World Series Roadshow. We have so much more to talk to you about here from Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, New York. We're going to relive the 1990s postseason as well as chat a little bit more about this Subway Series. We'll be right back on ESPN Classic.
Watch what I want when I want to. It's my way to forget about the day.
What do you like to watch?
Mainly cop shows.
Get a close on this guy. He's going away for a long time.
At Gateway, we know many businesses aren't big enough to have their own computer department.
What about training for my new guy?
That's no problem, too. That's why we put business centers in our Gateway Country stores.
People are hooked up to this hub.
Right. Share files, share one internet connection. Oh, cool.
So if you have a question about installation or need training, you can drop on by. Why do we spend so much time with the people who use our computers? Because in Gateway Country, people rule. Stop by or give us a call.
Introducing Chili's baby back ribs. To go.
I think it's going to be about a yard short. Bring it up 4th and 1.
Get in, get out, get on with your life.
Welcome back to ESPN Classics Roadshow. If you take the Brooklyn Bridge to Yankee Stadium, it's going to take you at least an hour and a half. Forget it. Take the train, the 4 train, the D train. It stops in Yankee Stadium, which is where the ESPN Classic Roadshow has stopped. And now stopping in with us, Brett Saberhagen. 2-time Cy Young Award winner with the Kansas City Royals, 1985 and 89, youngest ever to win the Cy Young Award in the American League. 21 years old in 1985 when he had a 20-6 record with a 2.87 ERA for the Royals. He had a career-high 23 wins in 1989, 3-time All-Star. Currently pitching with the Boston Red Sox, and also currently with us right here on the set with Tim Kirkjian and myself, Rich Eisen, here at the ESPN Classic Roadshow. Thanks for stopping by with us, Brett.
Pleasure. No.
Well, let's start with 1985, because you did have some time with the New York Mets. 21 years old, pitching a Game 7. What was that like?
The postseason wasn't too bad up until Game 7. Game 7 was, the whole season was riding on one game. When you win, you're the champions of the world, and if you lose, it's something that you're going to have to live with throughout the whole winter and through the rest of your career. So up until the time that I took the field, I was sitting in front of my locker next to George, and George came up and said, "What's the matter? What are you nervous about?" And it just seemed like everything was right on my shoulders until I got out to the field and threw the first pitch. I think I went to the bathroom probably about 5 or 6 times, and that was within the first 15 minutes I got to the stadium. So it was very nerve-wracking, but taking the field, and once you got the guys in the flow of the game, they scored a bunch of runs early in the game for me. We ended up winning 11-0. It made things very easy.
Sabes, you guys were down 3-1 in that series, and you came back to win. How did that happen?
I tell you, we had a bunch of guys that just wouldn't give up. We had team chemistry. I know there's a lot to be said about team chemistry, and we didn't have the best team on paper in '85, but we had the guys that stuck together and went out and played hard every game. Between Hal McRae, George Brett, Willie Wilson, Frank White, we had a group of guys that just loved to go out and play hard baseball.
First team to ever lose the first 2 games of a World Series at home and then come back to win were the '85 Royals. Talk a little bit about your manager who managed here in Yankee Stadium, Dick Hauser, back in 1980. He was sort of unceremoniously not kept. Is that what George Steinbrenner basically called it? Talk a little bit about him.
Well, Dick was probably instrumental in getting me going, and I think Dave Cohn had a lot to do with me making to the big leagues when I did. We came up at the same time in the Royals organization. He blew out his knee covering home plate. Somebody ran into him, and I was kind of behind him on the depth charts. And as it's turned out, Dick took myself and Mark Gubazaw up, and it probably would have been Dave at the time in 1984. So. Dick was a guy that just really wanted to go out and have you perform the best of your abilities. He was a guy that I think everybody respected, enjoyed playing for him, and he was pretty much instrumental in what he put together over there with us.
Nice hair, by the way.
That was
I like that.
The long dew days.
What was that? Like activator in that thing, pretty much?
Yeah, it was the Jerry curls. You name it, we had it going. I think it's a little bit tighter now. It looks a little bit better.
How much did you weigh back then, your rookie year?
I came out of high school. I was 155 pounds, and I've put on about 5 pounds each year since, and now I'm up to about 200. So my playing weight now is about 195 to 200.
And I mean, 21 years old at that stage of the game. Obviously, maybe you did think it at the time. What next? I mean, where do you go from there after being 21 years of age, winning Game 7 in a Cy Young?
Well, I was very fortunate at an early age to be on the right team, I guess, and with the right organization. In 1984, we lost to Detroit, to the Detroit Tigers in postseason, and they ended up going on to win the World Series. So I got a taste of the playoffs my first year. The second year we won a World Series, and I just kind of assumed that this was fun. It was easy. It was going to be a lot of fun throughout my career. And as it's turned out, the last 3 times that I've been in postseason, the shoulder hasn't been 100%. So you got to enjoy it while you can. And coming up to a series now, you see John Franco finally getting to the postseason, who's a good friend of mine, and his reaction the other night was, I haven't seen him more excited, while I've been associated and been a good friend of his. So it's good to see guys that haven't been to postseason get a chance to get there, and I'm pulling for the Mets.
You played for the Mets for 4 years, and granted, they didn't win a whole lot when you were there, when there was some controversy, but did you have a good time there? I really enjoyed my playing days with the Mets. We had our ups and downs. We had a lot more downs than we had ups, but I got married to a Long Island lady, and I've been living in Long Island ever since, so I enjoyed coming back here, and I got to a couple games when they were playing the Cardinals.
there's no better place to play than I think the East Coast. The Red Sox, the following there is unbelievable. The Yankees, you know, I mean, it's probably one of the best franchises in all of sports. The New York Mets, who have put together, you know, some great teams, and now the Subway Series. It's electrifying. I mean, you come out to the game the other night, the last game when the Mets clinched, and there was some kind of buzz in the air. You could feel the excitement going on, and it's good for all of baseball, not just New York.
I was here in Game 6. The Yankees clinched, and when David Justice hit that home run, it was just a tremendous relief, because Yankee fans could not make the Subway Series with the Mets already having made it, and there was just a tremendous relief here in the stadium.
Well, I think the Mets have a little easier task, because I don't think they're expected to win this series. So I think they have a good chance of doing it. I think they've got all the tools that they need. They've got great pitching. They've got a very good bench. They've got a great defense. And usually pitching dictates, and right now they've got some pretty good pitchers that are throwing for them. I know Clem's been on his game as of late, so Game 2 should be an interesting one as well.
You pitched some games in this ballpark. What's it like pitching on that hill right over there when 50,000 people are screaming in your ear here?
You know, it's great, because I don't know. I guess I use the negative times when they're giving you a hard time and they're getting on you. I use that, and I try to use it to pump me up. And when the guys, I think the toughest part is warming up out here in the bullpen when they're right on top of you, and they call you just about every name in the book. And but it's baseball, you know. That's what the excitement is. You come out, and sometimes you get to put it in their face. Sometimes you're the GOAT, but it's baseball at its best.
Well, you and friendly with John Franco, represented by the same agent, correct?
Yes.
We're represented by the same borough, Staten Island, New York. Thanks so much for joining us, Brett. We appreciate you joining us here.
Pleasure.
All right. Well, we'll see you next year on the mound in Boston.
Well, we're working at it right now. I'm back on the workout trail, and my off season's over. Yeah, I've already started working out to get it right for next year.
Terrific. We look forward to seeing that. Thanks so much for joining us here, Brett. Well, Brett mentioned a lot of the great relief pitchers that the New York Yankees have. Well, the decade started with the Nasty Boys, Dibble, Myers, and Charlton. We'll be talking about all the Reds when we come back.
This is ESPN Classic.
See a game in the house that Ruth built where the Yankees have won 25 World Series championships. And tonight's Game 1 will be the 93rd World Series game in the history of this fabulous stadium, Tim, and that is just unbelievable.
Right, and I've only seen a few of them here compared to the 93, but I'm telling you, there's no better place in this country to watch a World Series game than a Yankee Stadium.
Well, the Yankees took the last 2 World Championships of the 90s, and like the Oakland A's earlier in the 80s are going to be bleeding into the next decade. The Oakland A's in the late 80s, you know, lost to the Kirk Gibson-led Dodgers in 88, swept in 89, and then won the 1990 American League West Championship by 9 games, swept through the Red Sox in 4 games, and then hit the buzzsaw that is known the Cincinnati Reds back in 1990.
Right, and there were so many great stories to that World Series. Jose Rio, former Oakland A, wins the MVP in that series. Billy Hatcher hit .750 in that series. The whole Nasty Boys bullpen was just unhittable in that bullpen. Myers and Dibble and Charlton, and that's the biggest reason that they won. But there were so many other things. Billy Hatcher had the best 4-game average in a World Series since Babe Ruth. Amazing. The 2 managers in that series, Tony La Russa and Lou Piniella, played on a Tampa Legion team 248 years and years before. But the best story to that whole series was Billy Bates. This guy got 3 hits the entire season, and he got the biggest hit in Game 2, the decisive Game 2. This is a guy who late in the season, for a publicity stunt, was asked to race a cheetah from the Cincinnati Zoo. Of course, the cheetah won, but they called him, well, he's kind of like our little mascot for our team. Well, the mascot comes up in the 10th inning of Game 2 and gets a hit off of Dennis Eckersley, who had just finished the 2 greatest seasons ever put together by a reliever. That started the rally. They won that game, and that was it for the Oakland A's for that series.
Yeah, the Eck had 48 saves in that 1990 season with a .61 ERA, and in that Game 1, they snapped the A's 10-game postseason win streak. They snapped Dave Stewart's personal 6-game postseason win streak. Eric Davis led off the first inning with a 2-run home run, and that was pretty much the end of that. I mean, right then and there, they just laid notice on the Oakland A's that the Reds were for real.
And really, that was the end of the A's. You know, we all thought they'd win in '88. They won in '89, but that really got overshadowed by the earthquake. And then everybody thought that they would win in '90. And not only did they not win, they got swept. Nobody saw that coming. And really, that was it for the A's as being a dominant team.
And the Cincinnati Reds, Barry Larkin, in his only World Series of his great career right so far. .353 he batted. Chris Sabo, 2 home runs in Game 3 against Mike Moore, and it was also the first World Series for the Yankee current right fielder Paul O'Neill, who hit only .083. But we have to mention these things. That's our job, is it not, Tim?
Absolutely.
All right, well, we're going to be back on the ESPN Roadshow Classic World Series with a guy who plays third base for the New York Yankees in the mid-70s, Greg Nettles. We'll be back.
For an industry that prides itself on being high-tech, a lot of online brokers are surprisingly hands-on. Your order to buy or sell a stock simply gets handed from one middleman to the next. Which means, by the time your order's confirmed, you may wish it wasn't. Daytech Online, built to trade.
Yo, G, the great thing about 1-800-CALL-ATT is the rates don't bounce up and down.
For the same low rate every minute, everywhere, dial 1-800-CALL-ATT for collect calls.
1-800-CALL-ATT. Smooth.
A lot of online brokers still process orders the old way, sending them from one middleman to the next. Is your online order routed to get you the best available price? Daytech Online, built to trade.
For red, dry eyes, try Clear Eyes. It removes redness and has an ingredient to moisturize. Wow. The difference is clear. Clear Eyes.
Daytech Online's advanced routing technology instantly directs your order to an appropriate venue in an effort to get you the best available price. Find out more at daytech.com. Daytech Online, built to trade.
Welcome back to the ESPN Classic World Series Roadshow, presented by TiVo. Once again, here's Rich Eisen.
On the off night of this Subway Series, tune in to ESPN Classic, the Sports Century Top 50 and Beyond presentation of Mr. October, Reggie Jackson. That is Monday night at 8 Eastern on ESPN Classic. And before, during, and after the days that Reggie patrolled right field in Yankee Stadium, this base belonged to this man, Greg Nettles. And perhaps you could even state the case that he still owns third base at Yankee Stadium. Greg Nettles, 24 World Series games, 980 World Series field percentage. Everybody remembers the great snags he made in the 1978 World Series, 390 career home runs, 24 career World Series games, as we mentioned. And he also played in a flat even 2,700 career games. And none of these facts that I've mentioned you see on the TV screen, Greg, and I don't mean to freak you out, but you were one of my favorite ball players growing up in Staten Island, New York. I mean, just the way you played third base was something I still don't forget. I still get chills thinking about it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I mean, and Tim and I were talking about that 1978 World Series before when we saw you walk in today.
Right, and Game 3, the 5th and 6th innings, the Dodgers load the bases, and you make 2 great plays to stop those rallies. How many times have you seen those plays over the years?
Well, you know, I've seen them over and over because my kids watched them on the replay all the time. I'd be walking through the room, and they were watching them over and over and over. But I've seen them on highlight shows, too. So it's I'm glad I seen them because at the time, I was asked about them the next day, and I couldn't even remember them. I had to say, show them to me on the tape, and then I'll comment on them. But, you know, I had the ability to forget things right after they happened, and to get on with the next play, so I really couldn't remember them until I saw the tapes.
How do you do it? I mean, how do you react to something like that?
It's all reaction. It's, you know, I was never a fast runner, but I always had good first 2 or 3 steps, so it's a position where quick reactions rather than speed is what counts.
And you have great instincts because you're wearing an ESPN Classic hat.
That's right. I have good taste.
That's right, and I'm sure the next thing you're going to do is call 1-800-CLASSIC so you can get ESPN Classic on your home cable system today. Speaking of today, Game 1 of the Subway Series, Yankees-Mets. I mean, what's George going to be like if the Yankees lose this series?
I don't think I'll be around when that happens. I'll be back in San Diego watching it on TV. I might still hear him if it happens, but let's for the Yankees' sake, let's hope that doesn't happen.
Right. Back when you played Yankees-Mets games, it was for Abe Beam's trophy, right? The
Mayor's Trophy game kind of, it was a game that nobody really wanted. The players didn't want to play because it was played on a day off, and we'd rather have been doing different things. So right now, this is a big, obviously this is a bigger than the Mayor's Trophy game.
Greg, compare your great Yankee teams of the late 70s to this current Yankee team that has won, 3 out of the last 4. Your team was pretty darn good.
We were good. I think we stack up, you go around position by position. Catcher, Munson was there. Chambliss at first, Randolph at second. Bucky Dent at short. The current team might have the advantage there. I was at third, and Brocious, he's a very good fielding third baseman. So, and let people make their own decision about that. But, the outfield, we had Reggie, we had Mickey Rivers, we had Lou Piniella, Roy White. So, and in starting pitching, we had guys like Figueroa and Catfish Hunter and Guidry, and we had Sparky Lyle and Goose in the bullpen. So, we stacked up very well against these guys.
Now, one thing that I being a guy from New York, I couldn't believe. Yankees lost 15 of their last 18 games going into September. Yeah. Had a little bit of a problem against Oakland. When I say problem, I mean this is a team that sort of breezed through the postseason last year. And George didn't say a single word. Is this a kinder, gentler George that we're seeing?
I would hope so. I think maybe he's learned to let the guys fight themselves out of their slump. I think that the guys kind of cruised maybe the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's just it's natural to do that, and I think they thought they could turn it on once the playoffs came, and they did. They picked up a game up in the playoffs, and now they're here in the World Series. But yeah, I think George is probably mellowed a little bit in that respect.
Greg, this year Troy Glaus became the first American League third baseman to lead the league in homers since you did in '76 when you hit 32. How much has the game changed when 32 homers used to lead the league? It's changed a lot, hasn't it?
It's changed a bunch. Now you have that at the All-Star break. I remember I had 32 that year, and I think the nearest guy to me had maybe 28 or 27 or 29. I won it by a comfortable margin at 32, and that was, it used to be if you hit 20 home runs, you were a power hitter. Now if you hit 20 home runs, you're just an average, you've got average power. So, the game has changed a lot in that respect, and I think the fans like it. There's more offense. There's a lot more excitement to the game, I think.
A lot of your teammates are in a lot of postseason dugouts right now, or that one of them used to. Lou Piniella got eliminated, right. and Chambliss and Randolph as well, and I might be missing 1 or 2 off the top of my head right now. Do you keep in touch with some of these guys?
I see these guys every year at Old Timers Day when they come back here every year, and so I go down to spring training and see them down there. So we see each other 3 or 4 times a year, and it's always good to see those guys because they made me a lot of money. They made they made a lot of great memories for me.
When you play in these old timer games and you play third base, are you still saying hit the ball to me?
No. No, I'm telling somebody to hit it somewhere else because what reflexes I had are not there anymore. So I'm very happy when they hit it somewhere else.
Yeah, you like that room service hop.
Yes, I do. But when I was playing, I wanted the ball hit to me. It was you had to feel that way. You had to feel confident in your ability, and you had to say, hey, hit the ball to me, and you do something about it. But not anymore.
Well, Greg, thanks so much for being here on the ESPN Classic Roadshow with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Rich. Tim, thank you.
Enjoy the Subway Series. We are going to come back with yet more of the 1990s, reliving those years in New York City. More guests and more New York City Subway Series talk coming up.
I can tell my stepdaughter feels like we have nothing in common.
How was your day? It's pretty good.
I think we're kind of feeling each other out still.
Can I call you back?
We do share one thing.
Bye.
My clothes. She loves borrowing them, but she always manages to drip something all over them.
Introducing Tide Kick. Measure out the new Deep Clean formula, treat your stains, toss it into wash. It eliminates more of your stains than any leading pre-treater and regular detergent combined.
A year from now, I'd like to think we're just really good friends.
At Geico, we're always looking for faster ways to process your car insurance claims. One idea, airlifting claims adjusters right to the site of the accident. We're over the target. I don't see the car. It's that little black dot. They're all little black dots. Good luck. Oh, your laptop.
Geico Direct. A 15-minute call could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
ESPN Classic Roadshow is broadcasting live. Join us from Churchill Downs. We're off and running to the Breeders' Cup live from Louisville, Kentucky. Before the action on Saturday, catch some of the best races in history Friday. The greatest horses, the greatest jockeys. It's all to get you ready for the Breeders' Cup. Join ESPN Classic Roadshow live from the Breeders' Cup, starting Friday, November 3rd at 1 p.m., only on ESPN Classic. Presented by TiVo. The greatest sports in history are on ESPN Classic.
It's Saturday. Watch the hottest action on ice on Saturday Night NHL. Tonight from 9 to 11 on Game of the Night. That's only on ESPN Classic.
I guess the only thing I have to say at the outset today is, like a lot of things in life, you anticipate something and fear that it's coming, hope that it isn't. And when the day is here, there's an incredible amount of sadness.
Number 6.
Wow. What a bummer. 1994. It could not have gotten any lower in Major League Baseball. It certainly could get no lower in the 90s, which Tim Kirchin and I, Rich Eisen, are going to be chronicling for you throughout this ESPN Classic Roadshow here at the World Series at Yankee Stadium, taking you through the 1990s and that stop sign in 1994, so cruel, right in the middle of September, right in the middle of some really great seasons for some really great ball players.
You know, Jeff Bagwell was having a fabulous year that year, and it got ended. Tony Gwynn hit .394 that year. I really think he was going to hit .400 that season, and he never even got the chance. And then, of course, there's the Montreal Expos, who were 74-40 when that strike hit. They had John Wetland, Pedro Martinez, Moises Alou, Larry Walker on that team, and they didn't even get a chance to finish it. It was a terrible year for baseball, and it was even worse for the Expos because this was going to be their first chance to see if Montreal was a real baseball town, real playoff baseball, and they never got to see that, and that franchise really has never been the same since.
And these players for the Montreal Expos that you had mentioned still have not been in a World Series. Larry Walker, Darren Fletcher, Mike Lansing, currently on the Red Sox, Will Cordero with the Indians, Jeff Facero, Pedro Martinez, both with the Red Sox, all of them on 1994 Montreal Expos. None of them appeared in a World Series. Some, however, were fortunate to go on to a World Series appearance. Moises Alou, Marquise Grissom for the 95 Atlanta Braves, and of course John Wetland here in Yankee Stadium for the New York Yankees, who had been in such dire straits since the early 80s themselves. The New York Yankees went through that whole Steve Kemp era in the 80s, and then in the early 90s they had Stump Merrill being their manager, Bucky Dent getting fired as well, and they had a shot at going to the postseason with Buck Showalter, who's now currently working for us over at ESPN. And their season went out the window as well.
Well, so many seasons went down the drain, and the problem with the strike was it really took 4 years for baseball to get past that. It really took Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa in 1998 lighting it up with home runs every other day for baseball to be saved from the 94 strike. So anyone who doesn't understand how terrible that strike was needs to go examine those years in between that and the year that McGwire and Sosa went crazy, because basically they saved the game.
Now, Cal Ripken Jr. in his streak the next year, 1995, I think as well, was one of the, certainly restored people's faith in the game, because there was nothing more depressing than seeing all these ballparks empty when there should have been a fall classic, and it was just unbelievably depressing, to be quite honest with you, and some people still haven't come back to the sport.
Absolutely not. And, you know, like the 95 season was a pretty good season, but it was a truncated season, and people just weren't interested in it. And that was the worst part of them all, is that people stopped coming to the ballpark and stopped being interested. But again, if it weren't for 98, which I thought was the greatest baseball season in the history of the game, we'd still be having strike aftermath.
Now, dare we say there may be another one coming, unfortunately, with the collective bargaining agreement being up after the 2001 season, correct?
Yes, and all we can hope is that, you know, cooler minds prevail and we don't go through this again. We talked to Keith Hernandez before the show today, and he said, how could the players strike this time with all the money that they're making? But it's a lot bigger than that.
And Carlos Delgado, $17 million per. All right, we're going to have some more to talk about on the ESPN Classic Roadshow, including one of the former Montreal Expos, but a guy who achieved World Series glory for the New York Yankees, Tim Rock Raines, coming up on the ESPN Classic Roadshow.
Just put in neutral.
The new Chevy Tracker LT. Now with a powerful V6 engine, it thinks big.
Make sure your parking brake's off.
Chevy Tracker, like a rock.
Let's go! TiVo lets you create your own TV network, so you can watch what you want, when you want to. Huh. Educational programming for your kids.
That's a curveball. Laces out on a field goal. 7-10 split. Slamma, jamma. Icing. The law. Jenny, triple axel. Bobby, stop doing that. Jenny. Bobby, please! Bobby!
When Reggie came to the plate, people stopped.
Reggie had a huge ego, but Reggie was good, and he knew he was good.
He was a terribly, terribly insecure human being.
He delivered championships in Oakland, and he did it for me.
To see this guy hit 3 home runs out of the ballpark in one game in the World Series, I couldn't believe it.
Whether you love him or not, and whether you hate him or not, he won.
Reggie Jackson, Sports Century, the top 50 and beyond. Monday at 8, kicking off a week of sports legends, only on ESPN Classic.
How huge is this World Series? There's even a Subway Series logo on the side of the bases. Check that out. These guys, they'll be doing the YMC later in the 5th inning, as they always do in Yankee Stadium. That tradition started in 1996 when Tim Raines and the New York Yankees started doing some serious business. Tim Raines got a couple of hits against Greg Maddux in Game 2 of that World Series, one that the Yankees lost, when the Yankees only came out with 7 hits in that ball game. And Tim Raines played 4 games in that 1996 World Series for the New York Yankees, who lost the first 2 games at home and came back to win it. Member of 2 World Series champions of the New York Yankees, 807 career stolen bases, many of those with the Montreal Expos, with whom he hit .301, the all-time leader in Montreal's Expos batting average history. Congratulations. Thanks so much for joining us with us today,
Thanks
Tim.
for having me.
First question, how you feeling?
Feeling great. I'm looking forward to this World Series. You know, I never, in the 3 years I was with the Yankees, I never got an opportunity to play against the Mets. For some reason, there was injury or something like that. But to actually get an opportunity to see this finally unfold, I think a lot of people have been wanting this to happen for a long time, and finally it's come.
Tim, you lost the first 2 games in '96, and now you're going to Atlanta. What were you guys thinking? Did we think we're in big trouble, or were you thinking we're going to win it here?
No, I don't think so. I think I know Atlanta had the champagne already ready in Atlanta at the stadium, and I just felt if we can just get 1 game under our belt, we had a chance to come back, you know. But you know, if you look at the Braves pitching staff, you would have think there's no way we can come back and win this thing, but somehow the 3-run homer by Lyrics kind of jump-started the team, and that was all we needed to get going.
Well, you also jump-started the team yourself in that Game 3, in which the Yankees came down 0-2 in Atlanta. You led off the game, a base hit against Tom Glavine. Bernie Williams knocked you in. That was a quick run for David Cone, who had an incredible season in terms of coming back from an aneurysm. I mean, that was an incredible achievement that he came back and won Game 3, a huge Game 3 for you guys.
Well, actually, that year, it was a year of a lot of situations that was going on with our ball club. Like I said, Coney had aneurysm, and I think that was a year that Joe's brother was in the hospital as well. So, I mean, there were some things that a lot of emotions that were going all kinds of ways, and you know, to lose those first 2 games, you would have thought that we could have, you know, just closed the doors and let the Braves walk all over us. But I think what really got us going was, I remember this like it was yesterday. George Steinberger came to our clubhouse before the game, and he said that, well, I think after these next 2 games, we'll be going back home. I didn't think you guys could beat the Braves. And I think that was all it took for us to kind of get pumped up.
George told you he came in after Game 2 or before Game 3? Is that what he said?
That's
I don't
right.
think you guys can beat the Braves?
Yeah, he said we can't beat these guys. So hopefully we can get good enough next year and come back and win.
Did that fire you guys up? Hey, the owners lost faith in us?
Well, actually, you know, he told Joe, and Joe came out and told us. But I think that was something that really got us fired up. And I think it was the reasons why we felt that, because I think back in those times, George used to always come in and have something to say about the team. And, you know, for him to say something like that to a lot of veteran ball players, that kind of gets guys fired up and make us want to go out and do something that he didn't think that we could do.
That might have been George's reverse psychology, you know, that whole football coach mentality that George Steinbrenner has, I think.
I think a lot of times it had a lot to do with it. I mean, like you said, he was a football coach in his early years, and he still kind of had a football mentality, and I think a lot of times he brings that down to the baseball field. And a lot of guys, there's a lot of baseball players never played football, but for guys like myself and a few other guys who played football, we kind of understand that.
Tim, how different was it playing before packed houses at Yankee Stadium for the Yankees as opposed to playing in Montreal during some of those down years?
Well, it's hard for me to say it's a big difference because when I first started, I started in Montreal, and that was the years that we had like 25 to 30,000 fans back in the early 70s and then late 70s, early 80s. So we pretty much packed the house back then, and that's when we had some great ball clubs before they started, everybody started leaving. But I remember when I first started with the Expos, it was like, you know, I was in the big leagues, and it really didn't matter how many fans I played it for or how less fans, but coming here, that was totally different. You know, wasn't a really American League fan when I was a kid, but I knew about the Yankees, I knew about Babe Ruth, but that was about it. But when I came here and actually got an opportunity to play in Yankee Stadium, it was just something about Yankee Stadium and all the history of Yankee Stadium and the Yankee players. Kind of makes you, makes you feel warm inside. It makes you want to be a part of that.
Well, we'll certainly hear that frenzy tonight. Yankees versus Mets game one, no question about it. Thanks so much for joining us here on the ESPN Classic, Tim. Thanks so very much. Now, one of the things about the 1990s that a lot of folks may not remember, the Twins were good. A small market team could actually win the World Series. Yeah, it helped to have Kirby Puckett on your team as well. Kirby Puckett and the Miracle Twins of '91 on ESPN Classic when we return.
This is ESPN Classic. It's here. Wait.
Sponsored locally by Vegas and Shoppers Market with 7 convenient locations to serve you.
I'm Mario Batali. An easy way to add zest to a dish is with my recipe for a vegetable vinaigrette. It's quite simple. You start with Dijon mustard and red wine vinegar in the blender. Add a ½ cup of steamed carrots, season with salt and pepper to taste, and add a ½ cup of extra virgin olive oil and puree. Use your homemade vegetable vinaigrette to make leftovers fresh and fresh foods zestier.
I'm Kathy Wilbur, Director of the Michigan Department of Consumer and Industry Services. The Unemployment Agency is implementing a new system for handling unemployment benefits called Wage Record. Wage Record will eliminate paperwork for employers, reduce waiting time for claimants, and save millions of dollars for taxpayers. To learn more about Wage Record, please visit the website on the screen or call our customer relations hotlines for employers at the numbers you see on the screen.
Sometimes when the cable's out, it's not. If your cable's not working, first make sure your TV is on channel 3 or 4, the batteries in your remote are fresh and your wires are secured. And if you still have a problem, just call.
Kirby Puckett winning Game 6 of the 1991 World Series. Tim Kirkton, Rich Eisen back on the ESPN Classic Roadshow. The 1990s started off with the shocking red sweep of the mighty Oakland A's, and then came the worst to first 1991 World Series between the Twins and the Atlanta Braves, who had previously finished last in 1990, finished first. And what a World Series, Tim. 5 of the 7 games decided by a single run. 3 one-run games decided in extra innings, including Game 6 and 7. Unbelievable.
Well, I've covered 20 World Series, and that is the greatest World Series that I've ever seen, and I think you could make a case for it's the greatest World Series of all time. And Kirby Puckett was the #1 guy in that series. Game 6, a game they had to win. He basically said, fellas, get on my back. I'll take you all the way there. He drove in all the runs for the Twins. He made a great catch, and he hit the game-winning home run off Charlie Leibrandt, and that's why Kirby Puckett is going to the Hall of Fame when he's eligible this year, and I'm voting for him because he did such great things in such great games. But Game 7 was easily the best Game 7 that I've ever seen, and there have been a lot of great Game 7s. Jack Morris in Game 7 was just incredible, and he's facing John Smoltz, who's just basically a kid at this time, and these two pitched 9 scoreless innings. Smoltz was terrific that entire season, but this is why John Smoltz became the pitcher he became. Absolutely no... He wasn't affected by this at all. And here was Jack Morris, a Minneapolis guy, and he pitches 10 innings, wins the game in the 10th, and Tom Kelly came to take him out in the 10th inning of this game. And, of course, he didn't take him out. And I asked Randy Bush after the game, I said, was there any chance that TK was going to take him out in that game? And he said, oh, he would have killed Tom Kelly right there on the mound before he was coming out of that game. And that's why, to me, Jack Morris is a Hall of Famer.
Jack Morris, former Tiger great. John Smoltz, longtime Tiger fan, taking on his idol in that game. And that was truly unbelievable. And that game had also one of the more indelible images of World Series history. Lonnie Smith getting faked out at second base on Terry Pendleton's double in the 7th inning with nobody out. And of all the people who deked him on a defensive play at second,
Chuck Knobloch.
How about that?
Who probably isn't good enough defensively to play second base in the series. He was a rookie back then and a brilliant defensive player. And here, Lonnie Smith got so confused, he didn't know what he was doing. This is the winning run right here. This is the run that puts them ahead maybe to stay. And Chuck Knobloch basically faked Lonnie Smith out.
Well, a grounder to first, an intentional walk, and then a 3-2-3 double play hit into by Sid Bream. Got the Twins out of that jam, and then that game went on to extra innings, and just infamy. I mean, that is truly one of the great World Series and a great way to kick off the whole decade.
Right, and I maintain that is the loudest place on the face of the earth is the Metrodome indoors, and when Kirby Puckett hit that homer, and then Gene Larkin drove in the winning run in Game 7, I've never been in a louder building in my entire life.
And people are still waving white towels. They were doing that in Pac Bell Park and in Shea Stadium as well. And we should mention Chuck Knobloch in his first World Series. He hit .308, and Brian Harper swung a really nice stick. He hit .381, and David Justice, 2 home runs and 6 RBI. He hit 1 home run and 5 RBI in Game 5. And you know, the Twins, a small market team, and that's been it for the whole rest of the decade, and perhaps forevermore. It's unbelievable that the Twins actually won a World Series to some of the people these days.
Right, and the problem was that was a small market team then, but the disparity between the lowest market team and the highest market team was only about $15 million back then. Now the gap is like $70 million, and that's why these really small market teams have no chance today against the big market Yankees.
And Tom Kelly is going to stick around there for yet one more year, signed a 1-year contract extension after the end of the 2000 season. We still have so much more to talk about the 90s and the Subway Series. That's Times Square. What you have to do is walk over a couple blocks east to the 4 train at Grand Central to take it up to Yankee Stadium. We're back with former New York Met great Rusty Staub in a moment.
There's always a combination of taking your knowledge and applying it. For example, I know who the shooter is. I know what he does, what he thinks, under stress, how he'll act, what's his favorite thing to do, what's his least favorite thing to do. And I got most of my rebounds before he took the shot.
Knowledge is the edge. Call your advisor or Invesco Funds about the technology fund. You should know what Invesco knows.
Hey, Mr. Toolbelt, why don't you change your oil every 3,000 miles? And remember, women know when you lie. Look, missing an oil change is like giving a woman a vacuum cleaner for her birthday. You know better. Come on, consider the risk. This is reformulated Quaker State. Protection beyond 3,000 miles under any driving conditions. Can you say insurance? Because I could say I told you so. Reformulated Quaker State. It's been tested. It works. What more do you need to know?
Tomorrow, ESPN Classic presents another real classic. Bang the drum slowly. It wasn't until he faced death that he had the greatest season of his life.
How can he be so sick and play so well?
Academy Award winner Robert De Niro and Golden Globe winner Michael Moriarty star in a film about friendship and the triumph of the human spirit. It's real classics. It's Bang the Drum Slowly. Tomorrow night at 9, only on ESPN Classic.
It's Saturday. Watch the hottest action on ice on Saturday Night NHL. Tonight from 9 to 11 on Game of the Night. That's only on ESPN Classic.
Welcome back to the ESPN Classic Roadshow at the World Series, where we are now going to sit down and chat with former New York Met great Rusty Staub, part of that 1973 National League Championship team. Played 22 seasons for 5 different teams, 2 different stints with the Mets, sort of the Grover Cleveland of the New York Mets. Played with them from 72 to 75 and from 81 to 85. Hit .423 in that World Series. And north of the border, he is known as Le Grand Orange. And of course, here in New York, speaking French means something different. We might hear that in the stands tonight here at the Subway Series. Welcome, Rusty. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's a great day. It would have been nice to have a day game on a day like today, wouldn't it?
Oh, please. Well, that's something that's classic. No question about it. I could see you got 2 rings on right here. You've got tell us what rings you have on right now.
Well, I have the 73 ring from being the National League champions when we beat the Big Red Machine to everybody's chagrin, it seemed, in 73. And then we pushed Oakland pretty good. They had a great club, and they won in 7 games. The 86 ring, I actually was the assistant to Frank Cashin that year, and in fact, it's odd because Frank heard that I was not going to wear this ring because I was not a player. And he wrote me absolutely the finest letter I've ever received in my life, telling me all the reasons why I should wear this ring. And it impressed me so much, I wrote him back, and I said, thank you for those sincere thoughts. And I said, no one's ever said anything like that to me before. I said, I promise you I'll always wear the ring.
Rusty, in 73, the Mets were 10.5 games out in last place on August the 5th, and you won the division. How did that happen?
Well, what happened was nobody really took off and got hot other than us. I remember at the end of, about the middle part of August, the Expos were coming from L.A. to San Diego, and the Mets were in San Diego going to L.A., and we got puddled in the same bar before everybody got off their off day. And I was talking with Bob Bailey and some of the guys from the Expos, and I said, it's so crazy this year with our pitching staff, with Seaver, Matlack, and Kuzman. I said, George Stone's been pitching great. If we got hot, if we could start scoring some runs, because we were injured most of the year, I said, we have a real chance, to maybe get there ourselves. And they blew me off, completely blew me off. You got to be kidding yourself. Well, I had the last laugh, and you can bet I never let him. I never see Bob Bailey without reminding him.
Well, and you got the hardware to prove it right there on your left hand, no question about it. Talk to us about this Subway Series and what do you think it means to this city? It's going to shake the very foundation of this ballpark for sure, and certainly out at Shea.
Well, it's been since '86. Since the Mets have been in the World Series. It's been since, what, '56 that we've had a Subway Series. I think it's the greatest thing in the world for this city to be able to show and shine, okay, to the rest of the world. 2 great teams are going to play each other. There's going to be all kinds of competition. I hope the fans realize that they should cheer as loud as they want for their own guys and boo the other guys. I just hope that we can show a type of discipline and an enjoyment of the game, a respect for the players, so that the players are the combatants and not the people in the stands. It's a time for New York to really look good, and I think we have a chance to show the world what a wonderful place New York is to come.
Rusty, how wild was Shea Stadium during the World Series in '73, and how wild is it going to be this year?
When you have something that's happening immediate now, it always seems like it's louder, but it wasn't. It was incredible in '73. It was incredible in '86. In '86, it was the first year that I ever was a fan, okay, because I had never been in the stands. When I played in '73, a certain kind of calm came over me during that period of time. I mean, it was an amazing scenario. Winning the division was much more tense and pressure-packed than anything else, because we didn't win it till the day after the season was over. And as we were talking earlier, nobody, I mean, we were in last place at the end of August. Nobody expected us to be there. But when we got to the playoffs against Cincinnati, I just felt real comfortable. I mean, I guess different people react differently, but on the field itself, I didn't have any of this tension. But that series that the Mets played in '86 against Houston, I couldn't sit.
Wow, it was one heck of a series.
I mean, that was an awesome series, you know, especially Game 6. That was, I mean, you could cut it with a knife. The tension was so thick there. It was the first time I realized what being a fan meant.
Did you ever take the 7 train out to Shea as a player?
My first year here, I don't know what train it was, but we used to take a train. We used to live on 51st Street. Fregosi and myself and Boswell and Marshall, we used to get on the train and come out here. And then it got to be like, well, it was us and 50 children, you know, young people, and it got to be a little too much. So I started taking the car service out.
Rusty, in '73, Willie Mays, age 42, pinch ran for you in one of those games. Is that like an honor, or was that an insult that a 42-year-old guy is running for you?
What had happened, that was Game 2. If you remember, I partially separated my shoulder in Game 5 of the playoffs. They used me as a decoy in the first game of the World Series. And somehow I talked Yogi into get me in the lineup because I felt, you know, that would be a plus for us. Everybody relied on me for the RBIs, and I thought me being in the lineup was going to be a plus. It wasn't so much boasting, just I really felt like I was going to be able to have an input, and I had no idea I was going to hit like I did. I just didn't know what was going to happen. I got a hit in the latter part of the game, and I was actually not happy that he sent Willie out there because I couldn't throw a lick. You know, we kept telling everybody I had one throw. I had no throws. I mean, I had trouble taking my clothes off after the game. But when Willie came out, if he had sent Willie out with me in the outfield and we needed a throw, okay, then I would have totally understood. But, you know, we were all into what we were doing and stuff like that. And so for me, when Willie came out, I was surprised, yes, and I wasn't particularly happy, no.
And you hit 423 in that series. Come on.
You know, there's many times in your life that you play when you're hurt and you don't do well. And a lot of guys that were in my era did that a lot, okay? Maybe the big guy in the sky decided to smile down on me that particular time because I was really struggling. In fact, I didn't stay over. The writers...
It's like Shea right now almost, feeling nostalgic.
It is. I said, Jesus, I think this is the wrong ballpark. But I flew back. The team stayed overnight in Oakland and flew back the next day. I flew overnight with the writers so that I could come out to Shea and what I thought was going to be a private workout. I never told anybody. And I had Billy Connors, who was one of the coaches here, was with the Mets during that time, and he was going to come out and throw some BP to me so I could find a way to tuck this arm in. I was struggling. And I got out to Shea, and here I thought I was going to be by myself. There had to be 300 people from the media there. And so we made a deal. I told them if they would get back from the cage and leave me alone for a half hour, 45 minutes, when I finished, I would do everybody's interview. And I did. I stayed there for like 2 hours after.
Terrific, Rusty. Well, thanks so much for doing the interview with us today on ESPN Classic.
Pleasure to be with you.
Enjoy the Subway Series. Well, when he used to patrol right field here in Yankee Stadium, he's known as Mr. May. In October of '92, he told everybody, I got your Mr. May right here. Dave Winfield and the Blue Jays, as we look back on the '90s. Come back.
Big on taste, but low on cash? Try the new 99-cent BK Cravers menu from Burger King. 8 mouth-watering choices at an unbelievable price. Like the delicious flame-broiled Bullseye Barbecue Deluxe Burger or cheesy mozzarella sticks. Just 99 cents every day at Burger King, where you can get great-tasting food every day. Got the urge?
It all comes down to this. Ball on the 14-yard line. No timeouts left.
Tostitos? The exhilarating taste of new spicy quesadilla Tostitos chips.
Fight and march down the field. Smile up the touchdown.
It's fun for everyone. Dig in, kick back, Tostitos.
One opposing team prepared to play against Joe Montana by studying all the film from his last 3 games. They were trying to predict his moves, but they found that a little difficult. Out of 100 plays on first down, Montana called 100 different plays.
Expect more from an original Coors, brewed in Golden, Colorado.
Try something different. Try an original.
2 balls and 2 strikes on him. Here's the pitch on the way. A swing and a belt. Left field. Way back. Blue Jays win it. The Blue Jays are World Series champions as Joe Carter hits a 3-run home run in the 9th inning, and the Blue Jays have repeated as World Series champions. Touch them all, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life.
No, he wouldn't. Joe Carter, his 3-run home run off of Mitch Williams to end the 1993 World Series, Tim, capped a 2-year run for the Toronto Blue Jays that only the Yankees would later match later on in the decade. 2 straight World Series titles.
Right, and Joe Carter got him number 2. Joe Carter had hit one walk-off homer in his entire career until that one. And that was the first World Series homer that ever erased a deficit and simultaneously won the World Series. And one reason I don't think Joe Carter ever gets the credit for all this is that he hit it off of Mitch Williams, who was a story in himself. In that series, he got death threats after blowing Game 4, and he stayed up till 8 o'clock in the morning with a rifle at his chest. He told me later, he said, well, I wasn't going to shoot it. I was going to make my fiancée shoot it. But that was Mitch Williams for you, and he shook off a 2-2 slider from Darren Dalton. He said, I'm throwing the fastball here, which was typical Mitch Williams. He got it in the wrong place. Joe Carter said, I hooked that ball 99 times out of 100. I hook it foul. Well, this one, he kept fair.
Yeah, Mitch Williams 0-2 with a 20.25 ERA in that World Series. And the only other, by the way, World Series home run that ever erased a deficit and won a game in World Series history was Kirk Gibson in 1988. But these Toronto Blue Jays had a lot more players on that team than Joe Carter. Terrific players. Dave Winfield won the 1992 World Series when he doubled off of Charlie Leibrandt in the 11th inning. And then, Tim, the next year, the Blue Jays go out and replace Dave Winfield with a guy named Paul Molitor.
Right, and those were 2 great stories from those Blue Jay teams. That Winfield, of course, had never won a World Series. And then there's no more professional player in the last 20 years than Paul Molitor. He finally gets his chance to go to a winner. He angers everyone in Milwaukee for leaving. And then he has a fabulous World Series. Nobody played the game any better than Paul Molitor, any smarter than Paul Molitor. But this team was so much more. Robbie Alomar's going to the Hall of Fame. He had a tremendous series. He was the best player on those teams. They had Jimmy Key, another classy left-hander who never, ever beat himself and later ended up a big-time pitcher for the Yankees. They had so many good players on that team, and I think it's kind of a shame that they're not always recognized as one of the great teams.
Well, there were only, other than the Yankees, only one of 5 teams since 1920 to actually repeat World Series victories. You see the 21 and 22 Giants. They won the first 2 Subway Series ever, sweeping the 22 series against the New York Yankees when the Babe only went 2 for 17 with 2 singles. And again, the Toronto Blue Jays were more than just hitters as well. They had the great Jimmy Key. They had Dave Stewart and Jack Morris on both those teams. And they also had a great 1-2 combination in the bullpen in Dwayne Ward and Tom Henke. And they still won the 93 World Series after Tom Henke retired.
Well, they really won in 93 more than anything because of their bullpen. They had Dwayne Ward for the 7th and 8th inning, never got the credit that he deserved. Tom Henke's one of the greatest closers in history. He finished the 9th inning all the time. He retires, and Dwayne Ward, oh, they'll never do it without both of them. Dwayne Ward saved 45 games the next year. They won back-to-back seasons, and mostly because of that great bullpen.
And they knocked off the great Braves in 92, and they knocked off the Phillies in 93, even though Lenny Dykstra hit .348 with 4 home runs and 4 stolen bases. It just seems to me, Tim, that this team just never gets the proper respect. It all started in Game 2 in Atlanta when they flew the Canadian flag upside down during the national anthem. And even today, it seems that some teams just, some folks just don't respect. Hey, the Toronto Blue Jays also won 2 World Series in this decade. It's not just the Yankees here.
Right, and I think part of that is the 92 season was more about, in some people's minds, why the Braves didn't win again. And then that 93 Phillies team was, you know, a bunch of recalcitrants, these renegades, these guys who came from nowhere and did what they did. More focus was on the Phillies and the crazy guys on that team rather than the Blue Jays, and unfortunately, that's a shame.
Well, the Toronto Blue Jays folks did win 2 World Series in the 1990s as well. One of them at the expense of the Atlanta Braves, who could still be called the team of the 90s. When we come back, we will talk more about the 1990s, and we might actually tackle a question of the Braves. Are they the team of the 90s, even though the team that's in this city beat them twice? Plus, we'll talk with former Met Tug McGraw about the Subway Series and the New York Mets as well. It's all on ESPN Classic.
Labor of love took on a whole new meaning when Kyle was born. 12 hours of labor.
One of life's most joyful moments can also be one of its most painful. But take comfort, as so many women have, in Tylenol, the pain reliever doctors and hospitals choose most.
Come meet your little brother.
Hello. Tylenol, take comfort in our strength.
Who wants chunky soup? Huh? Terrell, you gotta try this new chunky soup.
But Ma,
Chunky grilled steak with vegetables. With loads of lean steak. Grilled up right to get you filled up right.
grilled steak.
Remind you of something?
The family cookout.
Which you don't attend anymore.
I work Sundays.
Introducing Campbell's Chunky Grilled Classics.
Try the new Pop Top.
I can tell my stepdaughter feels like we have nothing in common.
How was your day? It's pretty good.
I think we're kind of feeling each other out still.
Can I call you back?
We do share one thing. My clothes. She loves borrowing them, but she always manages to drip something all over them.
Introducing Tide Kick. Measure out the new Deep Clean formula, treat your stains, toss it into wash. It eliminates more of your stains than any leading pre-treater and regular detergent combined.
A year from now, I'd like to think we're just really good friends.
When Reggie came to the plate, people stopped.
Reggie had a huge ego, but Reggie was good, and he knew he was good.
He was a terribly, terribly insecure human being. He delivered championships in Oakland, and he did it for me.
To see this guy hit 3 home runs out of the ballpark in one game in the World Series, I couldn't believe it.
Whether you love him or not, and whether you hate him or not, he won.
Reggie Jackson, Sports Century, the top 50 and beyond. Tomorrow at 8, kicking off a week of sports legends, only on ESPN Classic.
You're watching ESPN Classic.
I never thought I'd get a credit card.
It's been pretty lonely at the video store lately. Now Comcast Digital Cable gives you up to 45 movie channels. More movies than satellite, more movies than anyone.
You've got a zillion places for your money, so maybe you were thinking about cutting back on some stuff. Now, realists that we are, we know the United Way is going to get cut off the list before, say, a new sofa. But look at it this way. Sooner or later, United Way agencies end up helping 1 in 3 people around here, and you never know when you, or someone you love, might be the one. The United Way, it's what we do together.
So we've been looking at these new satellite dishes.
Why is it the more I look?
The more questions I have.
A few reservations.
So where does this dish go? Why is it right out in front on the roof?
Just out there in the open.
I mean, we have a beautiful yard. I might have to cut some trees down, too. I'm not interested in cutting down some of the beautiful things I've had growing for years to make room for a satellite dish.
So this sounds like a pretty involved process.
And who's going to stay home?
Waiting for people to come and install it.
Me.
Satellite TV isn't all it's dished up to be.
I'm real excited.
To the ESPN Classic World Series Roadshow, presented by TiVo.
Welcome back to Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, New York, where during the 1990s, the Atlanta Braves lost 2 World Series. And Tim Kirkchin, if we're going to be talking about the 1990s and the history of the postseason in that decade, we are invariably going to get around to the Atlanta Braves, who win or lose in the World Series certainly could be called the team of the 90s. But the bottom line is they did not win more than 1 World Series, and that World Series was in 1995.
And in a lot of ways, the Braves just haven't gotten their proper credit. But they did win in '95, and they beat a great Cleveland Indians team, and it was really fitting that Tom Glavine won Game 6. He drove to the ballpark that day with Greg Maddux, who had been beaten in Game 5, and the Indians said, we're going to win the series now. We just beat their ace. Omar Vizquel, the great little Cleveland shortstop, said, the Braves know they can't win the World Series. Well, Glavine took it upon himself, and he and Maddux drove in, and they talked about how he was going to do it. it, and he pitched beautifully for 8 innings, went to Bobby Cox and said, I can't go the 9th. He brought in Mark Wohlers, who finished it out, and that's really the only year that the Braves had a really good bullpen. It's no coincidence that's the year they won.
And the year that, and in that game that Tom Glavine won, he got the 1 run that he needed of support from a guy who's going to be patrolling left field in this stadium tonight, David Justice. And Tim, it was sort of ironic that David Justice hit the crowning blow in that game.
Absolutely, because the day before, David Justice took on the fans and basically blasted the fans of Atlanta, saying they're not following us, and if we lose this time, they're going to burn our houses down. That's what he said. Pre-game introductions, he got booed unmercifully, but he ends up hitting the game-winning homer against Jim Poole, and the Braves finally won, and it was so fitting that David Justice, one of the great clutch postseason players, and a guy who sometimes used to open his mouth a little bit too much, ends up talking too much, but hitting the big homer.
I guess you might call it poetic justice. And so when you think about it, the Braves only went 1-4 in World Series. They say only, but at least they made it to 5 World Series, and they were very successful throughout the 1990s. And here is the resume that they have. And you could see Mark Wohlers with the last out right there of Marquise Grissom. Mark Wohlers, yeah, he could actually pitch once. A lot of folks will, of course, remember Mark Wohlers for the Jim Leyritz home run, as well as the fact that he could hardly find the plate in the latter half of the 1990s. And since the 1954 to 1963 Yankees, the Atlanta Braves have had the best 10-year stretch of any team in Major League Baseball.
And, Rich, they deserve a little bit more credit than most people give them, because they have more tiers of playoffs to get through. To get to the League Championship Series as many years in a row as they did was just remarkable. Bobby Cox never gets enough credit for the job that he did. All he does is get second guess for Mark Wohlers against Jim Leyritz and Steve Avery against Wade Boggs. They did a fabulous job in that decade. They just didn't win enough big games.
And what they did a lot of the times is they changed a lot of their personnel. They would come back with different people each year. A lot of folks might forget in the 1992 World Series, Deion Sanders played in that for the Atlanta Braves, and he only hit .533 with 5 stolen bases and 4 runs scored. So the Braves would always change their roster, and the same result would be the fact that they would either win the National League or the division, in the case of 1995, the World Series.
But, you know, John Smoltz told me this year, he said, I don't think we're built to win the World Series. And his point was, with our great starting pitching, you only use 3 of those guys, maybe 4, during the postseason as opposed to 5 during the regular season. Plus, they never, other than 95, had a deep bullpen. They never had a deep bench. And if you look closely at their offense in the World Series, they have never been a great offensive team in the World Series. So perhaps they weren't built for the postseason as they were for the regular season.
Well, even though this is not on ESPN, this is on ESPN Classic. By the way, call 1-800-ESPN Classic to get that at your local cable operator. We have a Did You Know, even though this is not on ESPN. The question that we ask you is, did you know the only 2 teams to lose 4 World Series in 1 decade are the New York Giants from 1910 to 1919 and the Atlanta Braves that we are talking about? In 1995, after the Braves won the World Series, Stan Kasten, the terrific executive in their front office, said, we are the team of the 90s, and the 90s are only half over. Well, there was a last half of the decade, and that last half of the decade was distinctly pinstriped. Wade Boggs and the 1996 world champion New York Yankees recounted.
In tennis, the advantage of the two-handed backhand is obviously power, because you're using both hands. But it also is deceiving because in a split second, you can change the direction of the ball that you hit. Your opponent never knows if you're going to rifle it down the line or rip it cross court, and I like that.
Knowledge is the edge. Call your advisor or Invesco Funds about the European Fund. You should know what Invesco knows.
What about Wednesdays? Yeah, I'd put a sitcom in that time slot. I think...
So anyway, your show's being cancelled.
Cancelled? I just bought a house. You can't...
Look at these guys. Network TV programmers. They decide what we watch and when we watch it.
You can't go in there. You have to go to
Who needs them? TiVo. TV your way.
At Gateway, we know many businesses aren't big enough to have their own computer department.
What about training for my new guy?
That's no problem, too. Anything. That's why we put business centers in our Gateway country stores.
People are hooked up to this hub.
Right. Share files, share one internet connection. Wow, cool. So if you have a question about installation or need training, you can drop on by. Why do we spend so much time with the people who use our computers? Because in Gateway country, people rule. Stop by or give us a call.
And here, standing. 2-2 pitch. Hit in the air. Deep left field. Playing back. Andrew Jones at the wall. Looking. Goodbye. Home run. Tie game. Jimmy Leyritz has tied this game up on a 3-run homer.
Well, only 3 teams in the history of the 7-game World Series have come back to win after losing the first 2 games at home, and we've had a representative from each of these teams on our set today. Brett Saberhagen and the Royals came back to beat the Cardinals. Keith Hernandez and the '86 Mets came back to beat the Red Sox, and Tim Raines and the '96 Yankees came back to beat the Atlanta Braves, and a lot of that had to do with the King, who you just saw hit that home run off of Mark Wohlers, hitting a changeup in the 8th inning, correct?
Well, it was a hanging slider, and Mark Wohlers in that series made the big mistake to Leyritz. Now, during that season, he came in to get 6 outs 1 time during the entire season, and it was a disaster. Of course, it wasn't nearly as big a disaster as this because the Leyritz homer not only tied that game, which they ended up winning, but it really started the dominance of the Yankees over the last 5 years was a Jim Leyritz homer.
Well, we heard from Tim Raines before say that that George Steinbrenner supposedly told Joe Torre and then told some of the members on the team that he didn't think that they had the muster to go ahead and beat the Atlanta Braves after losing the first 2 at home. But the story that we've always heard, Tim, is the fact that Joe Torre calmed down George Steinbrenner. His office said, don't worry, you know what, we're going to go down to Atlanta, win the next 3, and then come back and win Game 6, and that's exactly what the New York Yankees went ahead and did.
Right, and nobody believed that the Yankees could do that. And a friend of mine who writes for the Atlanta paper wrote when the series went there, he said, there will not be a clinching here. This will be a coronation for the Braves. And basically, that's what everybody thought. You never lose the first 2 games at home and then go sweep on the road. And that's exactly what the Yankees did. And again, that's where their dominance began in that 3-game series in Atlanta.
First 2 games, the Braves owned them. Andrew Jones made quite a splash, and as a rookie, hitting 2 home runs right here in Yankee Stadium, and then Greg Maddux shut him out, and then David Cohn, who we talked about before, Tim Raines coming off of that aneurysm, pitched a tremendous Game 3, and Jim Leyritz capped the comeback in Game 4, and then Game 5, yet another fall classic in which John Smoltz wound up on the wrong end, this time against Andy Pettitte, tonight's Game 1 starter.
Right, and Andy Pettitte was absolutely brilliant that game, and I'll never forget the fielding play that he made in that game. Fielding that bunt, wheeling and throwing to first in a absolutely critical situation, and people were questioning Andy Pettitte even back then, and he showed them, all right, I'll win the toughest game, because winning Game 5 brought the Yankees home with a lead.
And the Yankees began to, I guess, fashion their blueprint for success for the rest of the decade in that '96 season. Their bullpen, and John Wetland was an all-star closer, and he had a guy named Mariano Rivera setting up for him, going innings 7 and 8, and Rivera only would, of course, later to go on and break Whitey Ford's record for most consecutive scoreless innings in a postseason. And Tim, we could say that the decade finished up with such dominance in the bullpen, and began it with 1990 and the Nasty Boys.
Well, that's where it started with the Nasty Boys. Then the Blue Jays picked it up, but nobody perfected it better than the Yankees did in '96, because that wasn't just a 7-inning game. That became a 6-inning game. You better be ahead, because Rivera was going to come in and shut the door in 6 and 7 and 8. And then Wetland took over in the 9th. That was a perfect formula. When they lost Wetland, they lost a little bit, but then Rivera became the closer, Mendoza became the setup guy, and they still had the formula.
Well, before yesterday's workout, I was talking with Michael Kay, the longtime broadcaster and writer, before he was a broadcaster covering the New York Yankees. I asked him if David Justice popping out that home run in Game 6 against the Mariners was the loudest he's ever heard this place, and he said no, that the loudest he's ever heard it was when Joe Girardi popped that triple off of Greg Maddux over Andrew Jones's head in center field in Game 6 to plate the eventual go-ahead and winning runs for the New York Yankees in that Game 6.
Well, the reason that play shook was, you remember Greg Maddox's first start in that series. He was so unbelievably good. The Yankees had absolutely no chance against him. Now he's pitching in Game 6, and they have to beat him. And Joe Girardi, who wasn't exactly the best hitter on that team, hit that blow off of him, and that turned that game around also.
Well, this place is surely going to rock tonight, Tim. No question about it, because we were hearing the public address announcer run through. It wasn't Bob Shepard, but they were running through the pregame introductions. Apparently, Billy Joel is going to sing tonight's national anthem, as well as Don Larson and Yogi Berra throwing out the first pitch, I guess recounting the perfect game that Larson threw in the last Subway Series previous to this one. And then before as Billy Joel sings the national anthem, it will culminate with a bald eagle flying out from center field. George Steinbrenner, I guess, likes that patriotic theme. The bald eagle's been flying out from center field. to cap off the national anthem at the beginning of each of the home playoff games for the Yankees this season. And there is the bald eagle right there. We are just on top of everything on ESPN Classic. We're going to be chatting with Tug McGraw when we come back.
Of the bulls, flamenco dancing, and the world's largest tomato fight. Just a few of the more festive things that the Travel Channel brings. The Travel Channel, bringing there, here.
For dry, red eyes, Clear Eyes is a hit. It removes redness and has an ingredient to moisturize. Wow! The difference is clear. Clear Eyes.
Here I am, baby, crisp, juicy chicken just for you. I'm KFC's Twister, and I'm new. Oh, now here I come, baby, with wedges and drink just $2.99. Straight from KFC to you. Now, how good is that?
At least you'll feel smart when the car insurance bill arrives. Geico. A 15-minute call could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Want to see your piggy bank really grow? Geico. A 15-minute call could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
All this talk of bragging rights. A lot of folks in New Jersey like to point out to New Yorkers that this lady actually sits in New Jersey waters, to which New Yorkers respond, forget about it. That's something Mets and Yankee fans can actually agree on this Subway Series weekend. Welcome back to ESPN Classics Roadshow at the World Series at Yankee Stadium. And our next guest is a man with whom the term "you gotta believe" is associated. He personifies "you gotta believe." That would be Tug McGraw, the outstanding reliever of the New York Mets. 3.14 ERA, 180 career saves, 9 career World Series appearances, 1 save in the 1973 World Series with the Mets, 2 saves in the 1980 World Series with the Phillies, and of course a member of the 1969 World Series champion New York Mets. Tug McGraw now joins us. And Tug, we've been asking all our guests today, show off the hardware. What do you got on?
First, let's mention 103 sacrifice bunts.
Oh.
Okay.
That was not on my list.
Okay.
I think I've got to get after research for that.
Probably the most important statistic of my career.
100. You gave yourself up. There is no I in Tug.
There's no other reason to play baseball than to try to earn your ups. And once you get your ups, that's payday.
So when you got up, what'd you put on?
Today I've got my my 1969 World Champion New York Mets ring on. There you are, right there. And then for my birthday, the kids gave me my New York Mets watch.
Very nice.
All right.
Dare I ask you for what birthday?
It's not important. And then I have my Mets button here.
There you go. Believe. You got one on your left hand that you're holding.
And then I have, I'm not finished yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My most recent accomplishments, the 1980 World Championship, and of course, my wedding ring.
Yeah, okay. That's another accomplishment.
It's not meant to be a disguise. It's just that the Phillies ring fits there. The Mets ring doesn't.
I see. It's beautiful.
Tug, in '69, you had a really good year, and you didn't pitch in the World Series. What was that?
'69 was my first year as a relief pitcher. Gil Hodges said, Tug, you are a relief pitcher. And as the season went on, you're right, I had a good year. And I was really happy that I became a relief pitcher on Gil's advice. As it turns out, we were so good and dominated Baltimore so much that we didn't have to use some of our best players to win the World Series in 1969.
That includes you, right?
Well, I'm too humble to go that way. If you want to say that, that's entirely up to you.
Well, I mean, you were in that bullpen with
Ron Taylor. Ron Taylor, who's now the Toronto Blue Jays team doctor.
Well, Nolan Ryan was the guy who actually left him.
Nolan Ryan was in the bullpen. He started a lot during the season as well. And we had a great pitching staff. There's no getting around that. And we had adequate hitting. Cleon was real hot. Agee could lead you off with a home run now and then and steal some bases. Swoboda had some pretty good power. He was a good hitter. You know, when Buddy Harrelson was hot, he could be nasty at times. Kind of streaky, switch hitter. So we had some pretty good hitters. Don Clendenin, Ed Charles. Ed Charles actually platooned at third base with Wayne Garrett. Gave us a little left-handed bat. We used to call Wayne Garrett Huckleberry Finn. So.
Did you and Dr. Ron Taylor have long talks in the bullpen all the time?
Dr. Ron Taylor was just about that time thinking about his future because he was a veteran. And he had started getting real close to the team doctors around the league, and he had had some physical problems, and he was amazed at how they were being treated, and it stimulated his interest in medicine, I think. And no, brain surgery was my key interest in medicine, and baseball interfered with that. And Ron was more interested in orthopedics, so we didn't talk much.
What about the '73 World Series, Tug? What are your favorite memories from that?
'73 was a great World Series for baseball fans because, number one, it was Oakland's second year, and they had a dynamic team. It was great for me because all of us in New York got caught up in the "You Gotta Believe" slogan. But probably more important than anything else, Willie Mays. It was his swan song World Series, and got a chance to play in a World Series with Willie Mays, and with Willie Mays on base, and the Tugger coming to the plate, not being taken out for a pinch hitter, because they knew that the young left-hander had the best bunting technique in the history of the game.
I think you had 108 career?
103 career bunts, and we had men on first and second, less than 2 outs, and the Tugger comes up, and Bando came charging in. Campaneris rotated over towards third. Second base and shortstop was wide open because second baseman went to first. First baseman was charging in. The Tugger just firmed up the grip on the lower end of the bat, pointed that head out to shortstop, and knocked a base hit right out there. Got a base hit in the World Series on a bunt.
The Tugger was a factor, no question about it. How about in 1980? Talk about your achievements with the 1980 Phillies. 2 saves in that World Series. You certainly were a factor on the mound in that series for sure.
Greatest achievement about the 1980 World Series is that for the first time in Philadelphia history, it was 97 years before the Phillies finally won a World Series, and there you have was that Willie Wilson striking out for the final pitch. Yeah, that's one of those pitches where you're standing on the mound and you know that Gene Mauch blew it in 1964. You knew the Whiz Kids didn't make it in 1950. And you know that if you mess this one up, that you're not going to ever be in Philadelphia again as long as you live.
How many times have you seen the tape of you jumping in the air at the end of that thing?
Well, lots of times. Lots of times. What happened was that, you know, traditionally, ever since Don Larson threw the perfect game and Yogi came out and jumped on him, that's kind of like what catchers and pitchers do at the end of a win in the World Series. And so I looked for Booney to come running out. I jumped up. I didn't have anything to do with coming down. I came down all by myself. And then I looked for Booney to come out, and then I realized he couldn't do it. He was all beat up. And before we came to the ballpark that day, Schmitty drove me in, Mike Schmidt. And so he said that he was tired of me getting all this publicity for only pitching 1 inning here and there, where he played 9 innings every night and worked really a lot harder than I did, and he was right. And he said he deserved more publicity. So he said at the end of this World Series, he was going to run over from third base and dive on top of me and face the cameras and get his picture in the paper. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. I looked at Boone. He was not to be reckoned with. He was still getting up from his crouch, and I looked over to see if Schmitty was coming, and Schmitty came over and dove on top of me, and I got a picture of my arm in the paper. But Schmitty got a beautiful shot. So
here we go, right there. There you are.
There's me. I'm looking at Booney first, and then I looked over to see if Schmitty was coming. Schmitty says, "Okay, I'm going to do it." And so he comes running over, and he dives on top of me. So those are great moments to share with your teammates.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
And what's New York going to be like for this World Series? Is it going to be as insane as you've ever seen it?
You know, New Yorkers, baseball goes back much further here than most other places. And I think this is going to be the most. There's a lot of people in New York today that don't know the magnitude and the depth and the history and the tradition of baseball. There's a lot of people from all over the world that don't understand that live in New York. This is going to be like fresh, new seeds planted for all these people. And they're going to start taking sides now, like people are talking about it, and they're saying, the guy that drove me here today, what's all this about? You know, he was from somewhere in another land. I think it's going to be wonderful. The fans are going to teach everybody what baseball really, really means.
Well, Tug, I know we just met, but can you do me a favor? Can you tell Faith Hill I said hello, please?
Oh, aren't you something, huh?
Please, just you know, do me that favor.
I'll drop a word in for you.
Oh, I know she's taken. I just wanted to say hello. Thanks so much for joining us, Tug. I really appreciate that. Thank you. The great Tug McGraw. Let's go Mets, says Tug McGraw. 97, it was Let's Go Marlins. Well, Jim Leyland finally made his World Series. He finally won it. We'll recount that when ESPN Classic Roadshow returns to Yankee Stadium.
I can tell my stepdaughter feels like we have nothing in common.
How was your day? It's pretty good.
I think we're kind of feeling each other out still.
Can I call you back?
We do share one thing.
Sorry.
My clothes. She loves borrowing them, but she always manages to drip something all over them.
Introducing Tide Kick. Measure out the new Deep Clean formula, treat your stains, toss it into wash. It eliminates more of your stains than any leading pre-treater and regular detergent combined.
A year from now, I'd like to think we're just really good friends.
What do I know about performance? What do I know about control?
What do I know about grip?
Great horsepower. Limited slip, rear differential. Full-time, all-wheel drive. But what do we know? We're just girls.
Subaru Forester. Sport utility tough, car easy.
You think you're harder on your engine than most people? Well, good. Because there's a new motor oil made to take it. Introducing new Pennzoil Synthetic with Penzane. Penzane was developed for the space program and is used by NASA. Don't change your driving, just change your oil. Pennzoil Synthetic. It's rocket science for your car.
Line drive over second base into center. It's a hit. It's over. Counsell comes in to score. In the bottom of the 11th inning, the Marlins are in the win column. The world champion Marlins.
The second and final Game 7 of the 1990s postseason World Series history. In the books, Florida Marlins win that one over the Cleveland Indians. And Tim, as if the 1995 divisional series between the Yankees and the Mariners didn't already prove that the new format was outstanding, the fact that the Marlins, a wild card team, won the World Series, I think, clinched that.
Right, and the Marlins were obviously a really good team that year, and they lost to the Braves in the divisional race. But what happened was in the playoffs, they got to the Braves in the playoffs, and Jim Leyland got his coaches together, and he said, we're going to beat these guys. I have no idea how we're going to do it, but we're going to beat these guys. And this team became a very together team, which was amazing since they brought all these new players in from different places. They were basically the best team money could buy, a bunch of guys who would play with other organizations, but Jim Leyland put this club together in the best way he could, and it ended up a World Series champion.
That certainly helped that you had Kevin Brown on the team to go ahead and beat the Braves, and they went ahead and beat the Indians even without Alex Fernandez, who, if memory serves, blew out his shoulder in the NLCS against the Braves and was not available to pitch in the World Series.
Right, and the interesting thing is that Kevin Brown did not win a game in that series. He didn't even pitch very well, and the thought of the Marlins winning without him being great was, you know, inconceivable. But then other people stepped up, including Livan Hernandez, and then Al Leiter, of course, in Game 7 pitched extremely well. And I remember talking to some of their coaches before Game 7, and they said, we're starting Al Leiter. I don't think we could win, because back then Al was this incredibly erratic left-hander, and they just had never been tested in a really big game. He pitched extremely well, but they were still behind going to the 9th inning, and they got that thing tied because Craig Counsell and some other guys you'd never even heard of it, Craig Counsell had a sacrifice fly to tie that thing. They won it in extra innings because they had the Indians had a second baseman, Tony Fernandez, who probably shouldn't even have been in the game. Bip Roberts was supposed to be there, but he couldn't play because he got hurt, and that's how the Marlins ended up winning.
Well, Bip Roberts makes the program. Well, Livan Hernandez, one of those guys who stepped up, was the MVP of the World Series and the LCS, and was also one of several former Marlins to be in this very postseason. As you could see, some of them are still playing. Kurt Abbott, Dennis Cook, an outlier for the Mets. Livan Hernandez, Rob Nen, the great 1-2 punch in terms of starting and closing games for the Giants up there in San Francisco. Bobby Bowe for the Braves. Charles Johnson has been traded a couple of times since he's left the Marlins, and then Edgar Renteria, of course, with the Cardinals. And that, of course, brings up the second half of the story for the Florida Marlins. The first was buying the team, and the second one was totally breaking it up, obliterating it. And quite frankly, Tim, other than the strike, I think that the Marlins were the true blight, the other blight on Major League Baseball in the 1990s, because it just personified the economic problem with this team, that we're going to go out and buy everything, and if we can't get a big stadium that's tax financed by public dollars with all sorts of corporate boxes, then heck, then we're just going to mail it in.
And, you know, we knew during that World Series that as soon as this is over, they're going to start to unload. And they didn't take any time in unloading that entire team. And Jim Leyland, the manager, almost quit a month after winning the World Series as he's watching Moises Alou and all these other guys get shipped to other places. And I think it's a legitimate question. If the Marlins had been kept together with Alou and the top of that rotation with Leiter, Brown, and Hernandez, and Rob Nen in the bullpen, there's a chance the Yankees don't win 3 out of 4 years if that Marlin team is kept together. But financially, they just couldn't do it. And then they went from the World Series champ to the worst team ever to follow a World Series champion.
And in researching some of this stuff, because I'm very well researched, Tim, the thing that really just blew my mind, 67,000 people in pro player, and 67,000, the current Marlins would have trouble drawing that over a 6-game homestand right now.
Well, the problem with that, though, Rich, is those people really didn't show up until the postseason, and they didn't really get any kind of crowds in that place until Livan Hernandez showed up and went wild the rest of the season. It was absolutely brilliant. With the Latin influence, people started coming out and watching this team, but that wasn't indicative of the way that season went as far as attendance goes, and that's why they had so many financial problems, is they didn't draw anybody till August.
Well, after the Marlins wrapped up the 1997 World Series, the rest of the decade was decidedly New York Yankees. And that's going to bring everything full circle, Tim. We like to bring everything full circle going into this 2000 Subway Series. Yankees going for a three-peat, which was started off by perhaps this Scott Brosius home run in San Diego. Back to talk about that.
It's Saturday. Watch the hottest action on ice on Saturday Night NHL. Tonight from 9 to 11 on Game of the Night. That's only on ESPN Classic.
Hey, you know, we've been looking into these satellite TV dishes. And the more we look, the more questions I have.
So this only hooks up to one TV?
Oh.
So I have to buy more hardware.
So I have to pay extra
to watch it on another television.
It doesn't seem silly. You know, we have our TV, the kids want to watch something else, and this is costing all this extra money.
Let me get this straight. I wouldn't be able to do that with the satellite dish? Terrific.
Satellite TV isn't all it's dished up to be.
I have a few questions.
Sometimes when the cable's out, it's not. If your cable's not working, first make sure your TV is on channel 3 or 4. The batteries in your remote are fresh and your wires are secured. And if you still have a problem, just call.
2-2 to Brosius. Swung on and hit in the air to deep center. Finley back, away back, on the track, at the wall, gone! A 3-run home run for Scott Brosius. Scott Brosius might well be the MVP of the World Series. He hit a 3-run home run over the dead center field wall, and the Yankees take a 5-3 lead.
Yes, my Yankee compadre, John Sterling, Scott Brocious would be named the MVP of the 1998 World Series, and that was just all Yankees all the time in the 1998 season. They won the division by 22 games and stormed to an 11-2 postseason record. And that 22 games, largest margin in Yankee history, surpassing the 36 team that won the American League by 19.5 games. And Tim, they just went in to the 98 World Series, and they were down early on. Tony Gwynn, his first at-bat here in Yankee Stadium. What a great moment when he parked one into the upper deck off of David Wells. But the Yankees eventually came back in that game, and as we saw, came back in Game 3, and then it was over 4-0.
And after Game 3, I'll never forget, Tony Gwynn came to me and he said, "Are they really this good?" And it was like a rhetorical question. It's like he finally saw what everyone else in the country had been seeing for the Yankees for that entire season. And never was it more evident in Game 3 when Scott Brocious hit the homer off of Trevor Hoffman, who had blown one save the entire season. You could make a case that that season was the greatest season ever by a National League relief pitcher. He was the surest thing in the league. When he came in the 8th inning, which was only the 4th time he'd done that all year, of course, they're playing Hell's Bells. That place is going nuts. And before long, he hangs a changeup, and Brocious hits it out, and that whole place deflated. They said, "Oh, my goodness, they've just beat Trevor Hoffman," and that was the end of the Padres for that series.
Instead of it being 2-1, it was 3-0, and the Yankees, their trademark has always been score late and keep the other teams from scoring late. And in that series, they scored 3 times, as you saw in Game 3, and 3 times in the 8th inning in Game 3, twice in the 8th inning of Game 4, and then in Game 1, Tim, they scored 7 times in the 7th inning, and a lot of that had to do with a ball and strike call, questionable, called by Rich Garcia, who was, of course, already infamous in the stadium with the whole Jeffrey Mayer situation. Bases loaded to Tino Martinez, not strike 3 from Mark Langston.
Well, I thought it was strike 3, and so did a lot of other people. And, of course, the next pitch he hits for a grand slam, which, interestingly, Mark Langston, his entire career, gave up 2 grand slams. He had never given up a grand slam to a left-handed hitter. This was his first appearance in the World Series after a very long and distinguished career, and he gives up a slam to Tino in that spot, and the Padres are still angry to this day that Rich Garcia didn't call that a strike.
And David Wells started Game 1, and he was, of course, Mr. Perfect of 98, and a lot of folks said, well, they're up 3-0. Maybe we should bring back David Wells for another time, and instead they brought back, they threw Andy Pettitte on the mound, and it's pretty amazing that Andy Pettitte, like a Game 1 starter tonight, at that point was considered an iffy pitcher at that particular point.
He was iffy because he hadn't thrown very well, plus his father had just overcome heart surgery. It was a very delicate situation, and Andy Pettitte went out and, with the heart of a champion, as he's shown so many times, pitched a great game. Then he called his dad after the game, and as he told me, he said, we had a big cry over the phone, he and I. So Pettitte saved it, his dad was okay, and it was a great finish for the Yankees.
Well, you know, we're talking about the Yankees in 98. In the next segment, we're going to talk about the Yankees in 99. We've been talking about Yankees 2000 throughout, so why not revel in all things Yankee on ESPN Classic, which we will do again on Monday night, the off day of this Subway Series. The Sports Century Top 50 and Beyond Series takes a look at Mr. October, Reggie Jackson. That's Monday night, 8 Eastern on ESPN Classic. And as for 1999, well, the Yankees, after winning 125 games in 98, what did? They went out and they got Roger Clemens, who had a redemptive start in Game 4 as the Yankees swept out the Atlanta Braves. We'll recount that in a moment.
Great. ESPN, the magazine.
Well, thank you for calling.
Dan, can I put you on hold? Dan Patrick wants a free Polar Fleece pullover.
He writes a column for the magazine. But he's not a new subscriber.
Sorry, Dan. No can do on the fleece. It's only for new subscribers. You mean you're actually calling to subscribe?
Everyone wants our warm, roomy Polar Fleece pullover. It has a half-zip front and embroidered ESPN the magazine logo. And best of all, it's free.
Stuart Scott wants the fleece.
Booyah! Call now for ESPN the magazine and get your sports the way it ought to be. Big and bold, fast and furious. Get 26 issues, a year's worth for just $1 an issue. 66% off the newsstand price. And your fleece pullover is free.
It's Chris Berman. He could go all the way!
Hello? Call now.
1-800-532-7733.
If you have thinning hair, then this new booklet is something you should have, and you'll get it free if you call this toll-free number now. The booklet discusses the recent breakthroughs in genetic therapy and the latest non-surgical advancements. You'll see men like yourself who are able to get their hair back without drugs or surgery and have a totally active lifestyle. Whether you're getting it wet or roughing it up, no matter what sport, it looks, feels, and acts just like your own growing hair. So call 1-800-HAIR-CLUB now for your free booklet. And by the way, I'm also a client.
Welcome back to Yankee Stadium. We're out there in left field, a tough sun field in Yankee Stadium, and as the sun sets prior to Game 1 of the Subway Series, you could say it's a tough sunset in many ways. We have to fight through the glare, Tim.
We can see. That's all we need.
Okay, and we need sunblock 30 on the back of our necks. Well, last year, Tim, we're finally to the last year of the 90s, which we didn't know which was the team of the 90s, Atlanta or the Yankees, the New York Yankees. And in last year's World Series, fittingly, the 90s closed with the Braves against the Yankees. And going in, everybody said this series would decide who would be the team of the 90s, and the Yankees went out and swept the Braves. What a stunner that was.
Yeah, I don't think anybody saw that coming, but I'll never forget at the end, John Smoltz said, you know, in other World Series that we've lost, I've always said we could have won that World Series, but he said we couldn't win this World Series. They were much better than us in this World Series, and he was right, and partly because Javi Lopez, the Braves catcher, was hurt. Andres Galarraga didn't play. They had to use a second baseman as a DH in this series. The Braves were not a good offensive team, but the Yankees were just demonstrably better in this series, and they deserved to sweep.
And the season started out with a bit of controversy, or as if any team with 125 wins the year before would have controversy, but these are the New York Yankees, where they traded away David Wells prior to the season and brought in Roger Clemens. And Clemens didn't really have the season that a lot of Yankee fans had come to expect watching him as a member of the Red Sox, and certainly as a member of the Blue Jays, where he won a Cy Young Award. And he came in Game 4 and pitched the best game he had pitched to date as a Yankee.
Right, and you know, that trade got ripped all over the country. How could they trade David Wells for Roger Clemens? Roger Clemens, one of the greatest pitchers of all time. But they got him so he could pitch in the playoffs, and they got him so he could pitch in the World Series, which is what Wells had done. So Clemens' real chance came in Game 4, and he threw a gem. So it was almost like the gods who kept him away from the Red Sox finally got him a World Series championship with the Yankees.
Well, one guy that we had spoken about earlier is a setup man to John Wetland. Mariano Rivera, of course, in 1997, 98, and 99 became the man, and it's pretty much every single moment that the Yankees win, he's at the center of it, being hugged by his catcher.
And Rich, there's never been a postseason reliever even close to Mariano Rivera. I mean, Dennis Eckersley is the greatest reliever of all time, but even he gave up some big hits in the postseason. Even he gave up homers to Robbie Alomar and to Kirk Gibson. But Mariano Rivera doesn't give up homers to anybody. He went, you know, almost 40 years without giving up a run in the postseason. And more than anything, that's the reason why the Yankees are on the run that they are, is that great bullpen.
All right, Tim Kirkjian, I'm going to put it to you right here and now on ESPN Classic. Team of the 90s. Yankees or Braves?
Well, I got to say the Yankees,
All
but
right.
the Braves are such a close second. It's really 1A and 1B.
But the Yankees won 3 out of the last 4 world titles, and if you could speak to their legacy a little bit, even if they do go down in this Subway Series, that there's still much to talk about from the 90s of the New York Yankees.
Well, the Yankees, you know, they were dominant so much at the end of the decade. And, you know, we forget about how poorly they played at the beginning of the decade. But they're the most professional team that I've ever been around. I've never seen a team that knows how to win better than the Yankees do. I've never seen a team that's so committed to winning. They've won in so many different ways. Some years they just outpitch you, other years they just outhit you. But they always play the game the right way. And that's something to really admire in the Yankees.
And as you saw a video of David Wells right there, they've done it with different personnel, with David Wells, with Roger Clemens, with Jim Leyritz, with Rock Raines, who was here with us today, and then, of course, the 2000 version of the Yankees couldn't have been more retooled compared to 1999, and the one constant that you also saw throughout it, through that video was a guy like Jeter, and up the middle they have the Jeter, Rivera, Bernie Williams, as well as Posada, and of course Paul O'Neill's been a constant of this team as well.
Right, and that's what's amazing about the Yankees is how many different guys they've used over the years. But you're right, Rich, it's the core players that have really taken the Yankees to this height. I mean, it's Jeter, it's O'Neill, it's Rivera, and Bernie Williams. Until I see those guys walking off the field with their heads down as losers, that's when I'll believe that the Yankees are done. And they've had some troubles in this postseason, but you never never bet against those core guys.
Yeah, and Bernie Williams was a guy after the '98 season, the last out of the '98 World Series. A lot of folks did not know if that was going to be Bernie Williams' final game as a New York Yankee, and then the Yankees went out and I would say wisely re-signed Bernie Williams.
Well, again, this is why the Yankees are the Yankees, is they don't let their best players get away. In this era of free agency, when the Marlins are losing the whole team and other teams say, oh, we can't pay that much, the Yankees say, Bernie Williams is our guy. We have to keep him. It doesn't matter how much it costs. Granted, they have more money than anyone else, but still, they keep their best players, and great players win championships.
And so we can't forget Tino Martinez, of course, another one of those guys. And so the Yankees have won 3 out of the last 4 World Series. They could be the first team since the A's in the 70s to win 3 straight World Series. But if they dare to lose this Subway Series, Tim Kirchin.
Well, you know, it's really going to take away from some of the things that they've done. It's almost like this is a no-win series for the Yankees. If they win, well, they're supposed to win. They're the Yankees. But if they lose to the crosstown Mets, it's going to be a terrible loss for them. And I think that's what's driving them. Just like it's been driving them all year. Oh, we're too old. Oh, we're too tired. As if they need any more incentive, they've got it from this series.
Without question, Tim, there is one large imaginary rock sitting in New York City under which an entire fan base will have to crawl for the rest of their natural-born lives. Tim and I are going to wrap up the ESPN Classic Road Show from Yankee Stadium at the Subway Series in a matter of moments. We are only a couple hours away from the first pitch of Game 1 of the first Subway Series in 44 years.
Mr. 1-800-CALL-ATT for collect calls is his name. Saving big bucks is his game.
It's the same low rate every minute, everywhere. C-A-L-L-A-T-T.
He's afraid of nothing.
Who's that? Dial 1-800-CALL-ATT for collect calls.
Here I am, baby, crisp, juicy chicken just for you. I'm KFC's Twister, and I'm new. On that Here I Come, baby, with wedges and drink just $2.99. Straight from KFC to you now. How good is that?
I'd say that the TiVo's been a real godsend for me. I'm in a high-stress profession. When I get home, television's my salvation. TiVo let me create my own TV network, so I can watch what I want when I want to. It's my way to forget about the day.
What do you like to watch?
Mainly cop shows.
Get a close on this guy. He's going away for a long time. 5 seconds left. Kramer back to pass. He's going deep down the right side, and it is fought for, and it's touchdown!
This is ESPN Classic.
This ESPN Classic program is presented by TiVo. TV your way.
Well, he went into the hall with the interlocking NY on his cap. He had his number retired here in the Bronx, New York, so it's somewhat surprising when you think about it. Reggie only spent 5 years as a New York Yankee, but I should say he left his mark. We'll recount the entire career and life and times of Reggie Jackson in the Sports Century's Top 50 and Beyond, Monday at 8 Eastern Time. Well, we're going to wrap up the ESPN Classic Road Show from the Subway Series in Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, New York. And Tim, yesterday before the workouts, I was speaking to one of the regular broadcasters of the New York Yankees. I won't tell you who. He's got season tickets here at Yankee Stadium. Had 2 tickets to all the games here in Yankee Stadium. He was offered $5,000 apiece by one guy for each of his 2 tickets. And the guy told him, no, my wife and kids going. And the guy said, well, listen, either your wife and kids can go, or you can have a brand new car after Game 1. And he's choosing the wife and kids. Is this the toughest ticket that you can remember?
Well, I can't remember a bigger one than that. And I think 5,000 will be topped by somebody in this series. I mean, this is the Mets and the Yankees. This is history. This is 44 years since it happened. Plus, these are 2 really good teams in October.
Well, if there's a Game 7 in this series, my goodness, someone could walk away with a Mercedes-Benz if they have 4 ducats to Game 7 between the Mets and the Yankees of a Subway Series. And I think this is going to go at least 6 or 7 in this series.
Well, I think so, too, because we know all about how great the Yankees are. But I've seen the Mets through the entire postseason, and they are really good. And more importantly, they are really tough. They are not going to bow down for the Yankees. They are not afraid of the Yankees. And that's why I think this goes 7 games, because the Mets have terrific pitching also, which is not you know, anything that the Yankees could do anything about right now.
Well, Tim, I had a great time with you today. How about in 10 years we recount the 2000 through 2009 postseason? What do you think?
That sounds great.
And it'll obviously be an ESPN Classic Roadshow production. We're going to come to your city near you, the ESPN Classic Roadshow, every weekend. Thank you for joining us at the World Series.